Hi everyone, I'm Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber, and I've got a special guest today, someone that I've worked with for many years, someone I've admired for a very long time. It's Andy Geisse, who right now is an operating partner at Bessemer, and but was the CEO of at&t Business Services, and I got to know him as the CIO of at&t, and somebody that I have great respect for. We're going to ask him a ton of questions about cloud and business and cybersecurity. Andy, thanks so much for making time today.
Well, thanks for that great introduction, Ed, and thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
That's great. Andy, tell us a little bit about what you guys do at Bessemer, and then we can get into some of the tech there. You guys are one of the more powerful venture capital firms in the Valley. What have you guys been emphasizing recently?
Well, first of all, Bessemer Venture Partners is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, VC firm out there. Started in the early 1900s, and they've had a huge amount of successes over the last 100+ years, and failures too. That's what I love about Bessemer. They recognize their failures. They even have something called the anti-portfolio, where they recognize things that they should have invested in and didn't. But lately, it's very interesting at Bessemer. We have a bunch of different tracks, everywhere from space, where we look at things like satellite companies, rocket companies, drone companies, to your traditional sort of enterprise software companies, SaaS-based companies. We have quite a bit in the consumer track, everywhere from helping consumers in the restaurant area and the laundry area to payments, loan, a large fintech group, and believe it or not, a pretty big medical group that focuses on kind of the next generation that's happening in the health area. So a wide variety of things. It's really exciting, frankly.
Well, they must love having you as part of the team there, because you have so much practical experience, literally selling to every one of those sectors, right? I mean, you know them sort of inside and out.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's been fun for me because you would have thought that they would have me just focused on enterprise and telecom, but I get involved in the consumer side. As you probably remember, I also ran the wireline company and all the consumer piece quite a bit. I ran all the financials and the collections and that billing and that sort of thing. So it's been great because you get involved. Bessemer is so great in being in so many different areas that they'll pull you into companies that you would have never thought of before. And some exciting things, like I give you a great one. It's kind of a funny one, recent one, but you think about laundromats. They've been coin operated literally forever.
Yeah.
Well, now one of the investments Bessemer has a company called Sense that does end-to-end SaaS-based platform for laundromats that significantly improves those business from a cash flow perspective, from a service perspective, from a speed of doing business perspective. So a lot of fun.
Well, if they can find my left sock, then they'll really impress me.
That's exactly. Yeah, I got a whole drawer of one socks. I don't know what my wife does with them or I do with them.
Now, Andy, let's go back a little bit. So you and I both come from telecom. Tell us about your career. How did you get into this? A lot of people who probably are looking carefully at Bessemer and hoping that they can get some money there would probably benefit from hearing a little bit about your career and the kinds of things that were important to you.
Yeah, it's funny. Well, my career is really long. It would take our whole 30 minutes to talk about it. So, but bottom line is, typical big company. I told them I wanted to be in marketing, and they put me in night shift data center. and frankly, it was great because, as you know, IT and the systems and is the heart of the company often in terms of operating and running the business. And I learned a lot. And from there, I went running wireless company sales, business sales, to running wireless companies, which is where I spent a lot of my career. And then I was asked, as our former boss, Ed Whitaker, was buying up companies, I was asked to go run the software part of IT. They wanted a business person running the software part of IT. That opened my eyes up tremendously, in terms of what's out there. And I went from there, as you know, to CIO, then running all of customer service, and then running the wireline company, and then running the business group. And so a long history of doing different things. How did I get involved in venture capital? Well, the lesson I would give everybody on that is don't burn any bridges. I mean that sincerely. When I decided to leave AT&T, there was a press announcement and it hit the press, and a great guy named Bob Goodman, who was at Bessemer Venture Partners, and I hate to say it, I was so head down in my job, never even heard of Bessemer Venture Partners. Called me up and asked me what I was going to do, and I had a couple things I was considering, and he convinced me to come sit with them. What was supposed to be 6 months, and now it's been 6 years, to listen in and help them. And it's been the best decision I've ever made. I've really learned a lot and enjoyed a lot. So that's how it happened for me. And it turns out Bob was somebody who had a startup that had sold to me when I was in charge of wireless product development early in my career. So I guess the number one lesson I would give people is don't burn bridges.
I want to ask you about the AT&T run. You and I both stayed there a long time. What do you think now? Like, there's a lot of young people who are planning out careers, and my observation is people hop around a little more than they used to. I've found that there's some value maybe in staying in one place for a while. You learn the place, you learn the tech. What do you think are sort of the pros and cons for people maybe picking a company and staying versus hopping around and being in 10 different companies? I guess there's pros and cons of both. You and I chose one route. What do you think? Like, when young people ask you that question, what's usually your advice there?
Yeah, it's a very good question because I have 4 kids who generally, well, one hasn't, but generally have jumped around. And the younger generation sees this huge opportunity. And so it doesn't even occur to them to stay in one place. At least the group that I'm most familiar with, which are the folks working in the startup world and the kind of the early company world. And they go somewhere, it goes public, and they do well. And then they go off and look for their next one. So the advantages of that are, I mean, it can be lucrative. It can be a failure too. And that's what I try to tell these younger folks that ask me, it's minimum 80-20 rule that fails in the startup world. And if you were really honest about it, it's about 99% that fail, because when you look at all the companies that they pass before a VC firm even takes a company on to invest in, and VC companies make, it's the old 80-20 rule. They make most of their money on 20% of their investments. So I tell those folks, yeah, I can see how you could see that being lucrative and you can learn a lot, but you've got to balance risk versus stability. And it really depends on where they are in their life, I think. As far as the folks that have focused on being stable, what I've told them is there's nothing wrong with that. You can, in the same company, you can build a huge network there. And let's face it, really being a leader in a company is all about getting things done. And you get things done through your relationships and your network. I look at how you and I work together. I mean, you don't get things done by, being some all-powerful, knowledgeable person. You get things done by working with people. And if you stay in the same company, I mean, one of the great things with staying at AT&T in my case for 35 years is I had a huge network of people, and still do, from very frontline managers to non-management people all the way up to the executives, that helped me get my job done. And frankly, it's like a family a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
And so there's pros and cons of each, is what I would say.
I mean, everybody talks about, like, digital transformation is the correct kind of thing to be weaving into your strategy now. It makes sense. There's 1,000 reasons to do it. But when I think about how hard that can be, I don't know how, like, back in the day when we were making big changes to a complicated business, unless you understood the business, I was always sort of bewildered how people can hop into a company and understand it. Now, let's talk about digital transformation, because I know you have a lot of experience with that, and you even have told me that the term like digitization maybe was an older term, but it's something that people have been talking about a long time. What are some of your thoughts in that area, and what have you seen working, and what do you kind of see maybe not working as companies try to transform the way they do business?
That's a very good question. I guess I would first say that digitizing your business is more of a buzzword for what mankind have done from the beginning of time. I mean, they're always looking at improving their lives, whether it's from, think about Henry Ford and the first assembly line and how that drastically changed, the whole manufacturing process and changed the world in the industrial stage. And before that, inventing the abacus, inventing fire, go way back. So man is always trying to improve their business. I think when computers came in, it was initially about scale and how to do a lot more very fast. And now that has drastically changed. What we call digitization is really about transforming your business. It's about improving your service, improving the speed of business, improving the cost of your business. And frankly, this is kind of a new one, and it makes total sense is as you digitize your business, it makes you able to operate anywhere globally. I mean, I'll take a great example where I was an early investor is DocuSign. You know, that has totally transformed when and
Yeah.
how you do legal documents, when and how you can do contracts. I've done contracts when I'm sitting in Japan or Europe or things that in the past I could never do. They'd have to figure out how to FedEx it to me. And so to me, it's about speed, cost. Do you remember one of our former execs used to always have this mantra, better, faster, cheaper. Well, really, really digitizing your business is about doing things better for your customers. As far as my own experience, I used to run companies for at&t. So I ran, cellular companies, New York, Oklahoma, West Texas, Chile. And being with IT and having CIOs in that case work for me was always a frustrating experience because you had this crazy process of the business people would write the requirements and then throw it over the transom to IT, and they take forever to code and develop it, and then throw it back. And what came out is kind of like the old telephone game. What came out was never what the user really wanted. And so when I was sent from the business side to run software, one of the things that I did that now people call DevOps, but I took all of my developers and assigned them to individual business units that actually have to sit with them and move out there to be a part of it. And it was amazing to me because instead of just digitizing a current process, often those software engineers would see ways they could improve the process, take
Yeah.
steps out, and totally transform the business. And it has to be a collaborative effort. And I think that's happening even faster today. I don't know if you might not remember this because it might have been pre the merger with at&t, but when Ed Whitaker decided we're going to go into the video business with Uverse, he wanted it out in 12 months. Well, can you imagine developing a whole new suite of systems that could scale to millions and millions of customers in 12 months if we did it the traditional way? There was no way.
Right.
So instead, we locked all the developers and the business people up in the same room. And I guess it was kind of preliminary to what people call DevOps now. And they sat there and talked to each other, coded it right there, and looked at the results in an iterative process. So
Yeah.
to
Good
me,
approach.
yeah, to me, you've got to get rid of this divide between the software developers and the business users. And whether you call it DevOps or whatever you call it, you really have to be together as one company and improve those processes. I'll give you a startup, Bessemer startup actually, that did that for the cellular packet core. That was firmed
Mhm.
networks that has now been bought by Microsoft. But one of the things that the founder there told me, which is very interesting, he had studied the packet core, and I'm going to simplify his example, but there was 5 different processes, and he figured out a way to do it in 3 that significantly simplified the process, but it significantly improved the process too. not to mention taking out costs. And so that's the type of thinking you have to have. You have to think about not just digitizing the current business, but how do I improve the current business?
That's so interesting. It's funny. That's sort of like an inside out kind of thing where, embedding into the basics of the business and the process, looking for ways to improve things. But cloud and SaaS seem like the opposite. That's almost like outside in, where you've got these services that are out there. You mentioned DocuSign. That's a good one because usually you don't have to change your business process. But what are your thoughts on SaaS? Do you find that businesses have to realign what they're doing internally to match up with what the SaaS company is providing, or is it usually a little bit more unified? It's almost like digital transformation and cloud/SaaS, they tend to go together. Curious what you think about that stuff.
It's a very good question. And I have, and it's going to sound like they're opposite thoughts, but I have two thoughts. One is, yes, most of these SaaS platforms force a particular business process and capability into a business. But nowadays, they often have enough parameters, enough user controlled capability that you can customize it without messing up the core system to your business. And an example I'm going to give is when one of the reasons I was put into IT by my bosses at the time was because they had decided to put in an SAP system to do all the payroll. This is before the old Y2K thing. And of course, IT, as usual, wanted to develop their own. And I made a decision, no, we're going to buy something off the shelf. Well, forcing that standard system into a monolithic company like AT&T, you just wouldn't believe some of the crazy stuff that popped up that we had programmed into our systems over the years. And if I hadn't been involved in most of that, along with the CFO at the time, we would have had such a customized system, we could have never upgraded it. And so what I love about the SaaS systems is the software can move fast and reiterate fast, and you don't have all those customizations that blow up every time the software updates. It does have the danger of forcing the same processes on every company. And that's why the parameters and the ability to customize within the framework of the SaaS system is important, and to provide that speed for any particular business or change in processes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I do think that, and this is a little crazy idea probably, but I do think as we get better in machine learning and AI, I can see a SaaS system. Let's say we develop a SaaS system, to run, like there is one out there to run construction companies, also a Bessemer company, Procore. Well, this is just a wild idea, but it's developed for construction companies. It's got a set, vertical SaaS-based capability. It's a great system. Now, wouldn't it be cool if 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we could use AI and machine learning that system automatically improves, the business processes, automatically improves it for your particular business, no matter what that vertical SaaS may be. And I think it's a little bit of a pie in the sky, but I do think it's going to happen.
Machine learning and AI seem like maybe the glue here that kind of connects SaaS to these digital transformation initiatives. Do you think it's a little bit of hype there, or are you're pretty confident that when you breathe AI and these ML models in that try to detect patterns and predict stuff? What do you think? Have you had some pretty good experience at Bessemer and also in your career in dealing with these advanced algorithms?
A little bit of both. I would say a little bit of both. Anytime you have a new buzzword or technology, there's some hype with it. However, I have seen true AI systems that I wish I had. And I'll give you an example. One of the things when I had IT that we were responsible for was all the stores inside the cellular stores. Well, you can imagine there's a huge amount of video feeds coming out of those stores, and yet there's also still a large amount of shrinkage. Well, along comes a company. There's 3 or 4 of them out there. Bessemer actually has an investment in one called Spot AI, where it's basically using machine learning and a little bit of AI to analyze all those feeds and then pop up to a human, hey, this is something you need to go look for, or look for repetitive patterns that might look suspicious. And
Right.
the best example to go back to the early days of computers and the big mainframes, you may remember the systems consoles in there had thousands of messages in an hour, and a computer operator could easily miss something that was critical. And we all thought it was great when IBM finally figured out how to highlight certain messages that they could actually look at. And of course, it got much more sophisticated since then, popping those things out. And so I do think AI, I see it in quite a few industries, and it's getting better all the time. And by the way, one of the things with AI, I'm sure you understand this better than most. It's not just about the advanced algorithm. It's also about the data you have,
Yeah, of course.
and you learn more, and have more capabilities based on the amount of data that you have.
No, there's
So
no question. Now, it's crazy that we've been talking for over 20 minutes. I haven't mentioned cybersecurity once. So I'm going to ask you,
that is
you
your
know,
business, right?
that's my obsession. I know it's something you spend a lot of time thinking about. Just in the news every day now, there's somebody getting hacked and somebody losing their data and somebody having their systems affected, and just one thing after another. And I have my opinion about it. I think everything's too complicated. I don't think people understand what they've even deployed. But what do you think? Like when you're sitting there listening to one after another company having problems, what goes through your mind? You've had a lot of time to experience these things and work through them.
Yeah, and I still am heavily involved in cybersecurity today, and I've been on a board of a cybersecurity company. And I guess the things that come to my mind off the top of my head is it's an arms race, number one. Number two, the bad guys are really bad. And unfortunately, a lot of them are nation states who have amazing capability. It can get into just about anything and everywhere. And three, there is no perimeter anymore. As companies go to cloud-based systems and SaaS-based systems, it's not like the old days where you had this perimeter. I can remember before I became CIO and I was in charge of application development. In fact, one of the first discussions I had with you was about this very subject. The application folks, security was didn't even really think about it. Why? Because they assumed the network guys and the data center guys would make sure everything was secure and that they were behind this big firewall and this big perimeter that nobody could get into. Well, those days are gone. And what goes through my mind, in fact, I've even seen a few startups that are starting to look at this, is the new perimeter is the data. In other words, there is no perimeter. And so figuring out how to hold your data and protect your data and keep it from being not just hacked, but used improperly by employees. To me, that's what goes through my mind. I'm spending a lot of time thinking about that today.
Yeah.
You may remember, this is a crazy idea also, but I would love at some point, a monitoring system, if I was a CIO still, that tells me not only where all my critical data is, but when something nefarious happens to that critical data. And the best example I can think of, I've got 2 simple examples that you probably are very familiar with. You had HR folks downloading employee data to a PC, because they wanted to run reports on it, manipulate it, etc. The next thing you know, that PC gets stolen. Or worse yet, they don't have any password on that PC. I had the company will remain anonymous, but I was on the board of one company and on their cybersecurity subcommittee. And some marketing guy downloaded a bunch of data to an Amazon S3 database and didn't encrypt it, didn't put a password on it or anything. And it caused us all sorts of notices, that are required by the SEC, and it was a nightmare. and a high risk. And so I would love this future. My future vision would be, I know where all the data is, and I know if somebody's doing something they shouldn't to that data. and
A few companies trying something along those lines. I want to describe a scenario to you and see what you think. Because on the security side, here's what I continue to see, and I
right,
experience myself, and that's that you're working in, say, an enterprise security team, bank or wherever, telecom, government, and you know what you know about the infrastructure. You could, if somebody said, if you and I walk into a bank and we find somebody there, we say, describe the infrastructure, hand them a pen, the whiteboard, they're going to sketch something out. 10, 15, 20% of the infrastructure they'll be able to sketch up on the board. And then some incident happens, something gets hacked, and the local expert then tells his or her boss, who gets escalated up, finally comes to the security and CIO and so on, and they're hearing about this system or thing that got hacked for the first time. Like it's the real-time network monitor executive, and it's got an acronym. Everybody goes, what is that? And everybody writes it down, and then the expert gets on a call, tells everybody what the thing does. They're all taking notes. We understand how it got hacked. And then we all go brief the CEO as if we knew what that thing was, but we just learned about it literally an hour ago. And now we're like supposed to be the experts on it. And then it gets fixed. And now we know about that until a month later, some other thing you never heard of gets hacked, and it goes on and on and on. So it's led me to believe that one of the problems with cybersecurity is we just don't understand the stuff that's running in the company. That's why I asked you about lifetime employment earlier, because I believe that staying in a company for a little while and maybe learning how the damn place works is maybe the best thing you can do for security, because at least you know more of what's there. Does that scenario resonate? You probably had 1,000 times where somebody describes this thing and you go, what is that? And it got hacked. It's impossible to know everything. But what do you think? Is that scenario resonate at all?
that scenario is right on target. About
Yeah.
5 examples come right off my head where I had to talk to Ed Whitaker once, and who was our CEO at the time, and we didn't even know about the system. Some user had written the system, and it brought us to our
Right. It's
need.
stuff like that. And preventing that is impossible. So
It's
you
impossible.
almost have to plan for it and build infrastructure. Like that's one thing I like about cloud and SaaS, because it creates an environment or playground that at least is controlled. So if somebody wants to build something, then do it in Amazon. Here's how we do it. Here's how we're protected. If you want to go do it, go do it. But we've made it easy for you to do it. Then at least when you hear about it, you have a prayer of understanding how they actually did it. So that's been, I know when I get like asked all the time, how do you stop security? And I say, simplify. And they go, what do you mean? And I go, no, that's what I mean. Just if you can make things simpler, you probably have a better shot at security. That I always felt like in telecom, I always felt like I was the worst security person in the world, because I was always having that experience of something coming up that I just hadn't known about. Not a security thing, a system thing
Right.
that you didn't know existed. And then when you dug in, you realized that was connected to what? Or you accessed it with what? And you go, what? And you'd fix that, and you go back to your desk and think, are we playing whack-a-mole here? You know, I think a lot of companies do that, where they find a problem, is whack-a-mole, and it seems like that. So when I see companies getting hacked every day and a CEO apologizing on TV, you know, on CNBC, apologizing, and I'm sitting here watching, just shaking my head, you know that CEO is thinking, man, I didn't even know what this problem was. Now I'm apologizing to America. I don't know. Maybe
Well,
that's a somewhat cynical view, but that's what I've seen.
no, it's not a cynical view. Like I can give you numerous examples where a system was connected to our network that somebody had either bought or created and didn't have the right security protocols that ended up bringing the whole network down.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens all the time. So I'll give you two thoughts on it and one question maybe. The first thought I would have is, you got to have the ability to figure out and control the processes to inventory what's out there and know what's out there.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, when I first got moved to IT and was head of software, I was shocked to find out even within IT, we didn't know what systems we had, much less within the company. And so we started, you probably remember it, that we started that database that inventoried every system and every application. And
there's a lot of startups now that are working in that area. Asset management discovery is a big investment area. It's a good idea.
Yeah, discovery and asset management, exactly right. And we did ours mainly manually, but it was nowadays it's continuing to improve. So that's one thought that comes to my mind. The second is, I believe the future is more and more cloud-based, SaaS-based systems. And so you'll have limited other systems popping out. However, I'll give you what one CIO told me, which I thought was a great idea. In trying to solve this issue and problem of these rogue systems that get created that then end up bringing the whole company down, which in our case happened several times. One of his thoughts was, and he does it, is he puts what you said, he puts a play area out in Amazon, in AWS, and tells the users, okay, you can go do that and play it, but you have to do it here. That's the only place I'm going to give you the data, the only place I'm going to give you access, and at least he has some control over where that is.
I agree with that.
But as we move, it's interesting to me, as we move to more and more cloud-based applications, whether it's one of the three big guys like AWS, Azure, or Google, or whether it's a SaaS-based system vertical, which there's a lot of them out there. The positive on that is most of those big guys have huge cybersecurity teams, much more than the average company can afford. And they're much more focused on it and trying to protect it. The negative of that is, and this is where the question comes in, one of the things you taught me early on when we first started working together is, hey, one of the ways you protect yourself is you don't put all your eggs in one basket. And you do have some diversification of the data, some diversification of the systems capabilities. As things start to concentrate on these SaaS-based systems or cloud-based systems, one of the big public guys, what's your view on how that affects security in the long run, cybersecurity?
Well, the innards of how most cloud services work now involves distribution, virtualization. So you build out these instances of containers and use software like Kubernetes to orchestrate. So what happens is within these big cloud services, there's massive microsegmentation of different components. Now, you're right in saying that anything shared could have implications like the network, like DNS, like other kinds of things. So they do have to learn how to distribute that. But look, in telco, I would say over the last 30 or 40 years, there's really only been 2 or 3 major providers, and everybody trusted us with their data, and I think we did a good job. So I think that we were already have learned that certain things do need to be centralized. I think communications is one of them. And I'm beginning to think that cloud infrastructure is a second. So I like that there's 3 or 4, and you could add IBM to that. There's a bunch of other companies that are providing virtualization infrastructure and cloud services, and a lot of private clouds and virtualized data centers. I think there's enough diversity there that with the inner diversity of microsegmenting and the way the geo distribution works for most of these companies, I think it's pretty good. Now, if you're Bank of America or you're the US Department of Defense, you have the resources to do things yourself. We had some pretty good resources where we worked. But if you're a mid-sized company, a community bank or a small municipal department, I think you're way better off letting Microsoft help you than
Right.
like hiring Kevin to tend to your firewall or something. That's not right. So
Right.
I don't think it's perfect, but I think that it raises the bar. You're right that there are risks in some more centralization, but for most companies, it's such an improvement that it's something they should be doing. So I mean, I guess a little, you and I are a little biased because we do come from big company roots, but I think larger infrastructure players are going to be able to handle the smaller use cases much better than a small company. So I'm glad
I
people are
agree.
doing it, you know.
I agree with
Hey,
you.
Andy, I'll tell you, you are an icon in this
I
industry.
don't know about that.
I'm sure a lot of people watching, are probably doing their research with the VCs. What's the best way for somebody to be in touch with you or with your team there at Bessemer? Is the website a good place, or what for people who have some
The
interest?
website's a good place, or on LinkedIn is another good
Mm-hmm.
place. Um, but you'd be surprised, Bessemer especially is great at what I would call their analyst program.
Mm.
And really, they're out scouring the market. So rarely, almost all their investments are from things that an analyst found out in the
Sorry,
marketplace that's
I didn't
new and
know that.
disruptive. Yeah, it's very interesting.
I always think you guys have a slush pile from the ground to the ceiling. That's
No, not the
yeah.
case. And in fact, that's one of the things I love about Bessemer. They bring in these very, very sharp, smart folks, and I go. In fact, besides going to the partner meeting, one of the things I do is I go to the analyst meeting. Why? Because first of all, they're off the chart smarts,
Yeah, right.
and they're out scouring the market for new and different things. And it's amazing how many jewels they find out there in the market. And it says something great about the human race. They're all across the world, by the way. People are inventing new things. I mean, just when you think of yours and my age, or at least my age, you think, oh my gosh, nothing else new could come around, and there's somebody comes up with a crazy idea that is just out of this world. That's great, So
It's a
um,
fun time to be in sort of the innovation business, that's for sure. That's for
yeah,
sure. But
that's
well,
right.
listen, on behalf of my team at Tag Cyber, everybody watching, thanks for making a good chunk of your day here for us to share some information. And let's check back in again and do part two soon. There's a lot more to talk about.
Sure. Thank you, Ed, and thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Andy. And for everybody else, we'll see you all next time.